J. Rose, and today we're going to be talking about belonging again, section 25, and it's going to open by talking about Mr. Hunter's book on American Evangelism, and it was written in the 80s, and it was an exploration of how a group of people maintain their beliefs, or thought about their beliefs, or explored their beliefs when faced with the pressures of modernity. And this is a very interesting case study for Mr. Hunter, because he believes it's going to turn out to be the case that the more we develop and go into pluralism, the more that everyone is going to feel these kind of pressures of modernity to make their beliefs fit with how the world works, and so on and so forth. And he's going to talk this opening paragraph, I'll read where he describes this from the book. He says, human beings require constant and present social confirmation to sustain their beliefs about reality. And where the social composition of a society is diversified, that social support necessarily dwindles. The net effect is the rendering of a commitment to a certain worldview precarious, if not altogether implausible. The most fundamental and enduring experience a person is likely to encounter, then, is cognitive dissonance, an experience of confusion and anxiety about the certainty of his understanding of reality. At the least, this leads to a questioning of the veracity of his beliefs and the consideration of the possibilities of the truth of the beliefs of another. There are gods other than my own. Is it possible that? So on. Given a major collision of his view of reality with an alien conception in the absence of social conditions that confirm his own beliefs, it is highly probable that his beliefs will be compromised. He will feel constrained to modify aspects of his worldview to account for this plurality in a conciliatory way. So, as you encounter the other who thinks different than you, this leads to cognitive dissonance, and to handle that cognitive dissonance, you're going to then explore your belief or think about your belief in manners of which could make space for the other, so that you can escape that cognitive dissonance, so you can get back to a place where you feel comfortable and at ease. Dr. Smith, James K. Smith, has a great book on Charles Taylor's The Secular Age, and he mentions that David Foster Wallace, Infinite Jest, in line with this line of thought. But, Dr. Smith will discuss there about how everyone, not just religious people, but atheists, everyone feels this existential uncertainty about what to think about and what not to think about, what's true and what's not true. And what's interesting here is where Hunter has focused on American evangelism in the early 90s, late 80s, that this ends up being a case study of what everyone will experience, and that's something that Dr. Smith will discuss as well. When the world disaffirming qualities inherent in modernity reach a certain level, modern people will resist or protest against these discontentments that Mr. Hunter references there. So if you live in a world that doesn't confirm your world, that breaks down that fit between your subjectivity and your social world, as we discussed in the last section, there's likely to be a backlash. And this gets into totalitarianism and so on and so forth. And then, as of when Mr. Hunter is speaking, he says, although only a small percentage of modern people have abandoned a commitment to religious truth, most people in modern societies have at least become deeply perplexed by the ambiguities posed by the structural features of modernity. The principal constraint structural pluralism imposes on religion is privatization. So Dr. Hunter here is arguing that what the secular world does, what pluralism, the modern world does, is make people become more and more private with their beliefs. They're not able to freely extend them into the social sphere as much. They're more privatized. Now, in some degrees, this can be good because you don't have as much oppression and there's more space for individual difference and change, and people don't, you have less chance of the banality of evil. But if there's a movement in favor of privatization, that can lead you to atomization, which of course is what a lot of people now discuss is a big problem. This everyone is now atomized. But of course, the social sphere naturally makes you feel like you have to take your deeply held beliefs or your strongest views to the private sphere. You have to turn inward, to use that language from Peter Berger again. And so it shouldn't surprise us that there's more separation, more atomism, more tribalism. Again, speaking about American evangelism, Hunter writes, religion is pressured into becoming depoliticized as well. Its proper role is defined exclusively in terms of the satisfaction of personal or subjective needs. As an institution, it is formally expected to provide subjectively meaningful interpretations of experience at the major events of the life cycle, a foundation for personal identity and moral coordination along which to order daily life. Thus, religion has a legitimate role in modern life, but a role sharply circumscribed in relation to its formal status in relatively non-modern situations. So, Hunter's saying that religion's still important to people. It helps organize their lives, but it's much more privatized. It's much less public, and therefore it's much less publicly supported. And when it is much less publicly supported, it becomes much more existential and existentially difficult to hold and to even consider. So he's going to use the phrase, which I like. It makes me think of the phrase neo-reading on that paper regarding law and the Supreme Court and different things. But there's this, what ends up happening in the modern world is there's this constant causal reciprocity between consciousness and social structure. At the level of consciousness, the dynamics of this interchange may be labeled as cognitive bargaining. So there's a lot of cognitive bargaining between the private beliefs and the social sphere, where there's a little give. The social sphere says you can't practice X, so you don't practice X. But then you have to also feel like the social sphere is going to have a little give and make space for personal beliefs. If not, people tend to get upset and there tends to be a backlash. And in some respects, we can see the whole debate of free speech as having something to do with that, where people don't feel like they can extend their private beliefs into the social sphere at all. If people are made to feel like they have to keep their personal beliefs totally private, well, then they feel like they can't participate in the society, and that becomes very difficult. The section is also going to describe Charles Taylor's Nova effect, where he's, Dr. Taylor in The Secular Age argued that surprisingly secularization has not led to the loss of religion, but this explosion of religion, this great multiplicity of religion. He calls it the Nova effect. I would like to argue that I'm not so sure. It would seem to me that Taylor conflates multiplicity with flourishing. And I might be wrong with this, but I'm not sure that the multiplicity of religion that perhaps has occurred under secularization is not inflation. I'm not sure if it's actually religion losing its power, not through a deletion, like perhaps people thought with secularization, but it's losing its stickiness. It's all losing its ability to hold people to it, as I think we see with pew numbers and collapsing church attendance and things like that. So I spend a little time in this section kind of arguing that I'm not sure if the Nova effect means exactly what Taylor thinks it means in the secular age, precisely because the great multiplicity of religion is actually an indication of all this cognitive bargaining going on. It's not necessarily a sign of people having religious epiphanies and there being this explosion of spiritual awakening. It simply could be a result of the increased privatization of people that is forcing them to, in not having social support, they're more likely to come up with their own beliefs. So you have a multiplication of beliefs. So it's very possible that the Nova effect that Mr. Taylor describes is more evidence of what Hunter and Berger and different people warned about, that all show a lack of stickiness, where religion is losing stickiness. Sure, maybe it's multiplying, but it might be losing stickiness as well. Another way to put it is that you could say, though the amount of religious activity is perhaps increasing, the capacity of religions to function as plausible and hence provide existential stability is dropping. Now, if we look at previous sections, if there is this kind of push of people taking their private and personal beliefs inward, and again, it doesn't just apply to religion. I mean, people can feel that they can have certain conservative or liberal views that they're not allowed to put in the public sphere, or medical views, or without getting attacked, and so on. So people feel like they have to be more private and more quiet, and they have to turn inward. Well, when this occurs and people aren't participating in the social sphere, people also aren't going to trust the institutions, because the social institutions are likely going to be the ones that tell people they can't, they can't bring their private beliefs into the sphere or they get punished. So there tends to be a legitimization crisis that Habermas describes, where institutions lose their power. There is so deinstitutionalization is closely related to secularization. Dr. Hunter will tell us, not only because secularization deletes religion, but because it has this turning inward that occurs. Where people are forced to withdraw. not just for religious reasons, but for just for all reasons and in all different beliefs. Well, this is going to hurt mediating structures, social mediating structures, bowling clubs, Lions clubs, Boy Scout, all these different Girl Scouts, these things we described last time, and that in turn will affect plausibility structures, ruining the givenness of the society, which again will increase freedom, but it might also increase existential anxiety to a point that people cannot handle it. To close, I like this extensive quote from Dr. Hunter that I end the section with that I find very interesting, where he says, "If institutions pattern human thought, behavior, and social relations in a habitual and socially predictable manner, as well as provide human experience with an intelligibility and sense of continuity, then the deinstitutionalization of religious reality is the process whereby the patterns of human behavior and social relations become unstable, and the common sense coherence of traditionally valid reality definitions become unreliable and undependable. In human terms, deinstitutionalization means that people are faced with an increasing number of choices concerning the manner in which to carry out the events of daily life. Modernity is characterized by an unprecedented degree of deinstitutionalization affecting all of the dimensions of private sphere activity. Religious definitions of reality are particularly vulnerable to this process. The picture of the world presented in religious doctrine and symbols is not necessarily denied as a result of these structural tendencies, but is disaffirmed and therefore becomes less plausible in the minds of those confronting these forces. The truth or falseness of religion becomes a matter of individual choice." And so with that, Dr. Hunter, I think, sums up very well his analysis of American evangelicalism, which I think applies to all of us now in our increasingly pluralized and globalized age, and we have to learn what we are going to do with it, how to handle the resulting tensions so that we don't turn to totalitarianism. For more belonging, again, please see the playlist, YouTube. There's a list on Medium. For more by O.G. Rose, please visit ogrose.com. Anchor, Twitter, Instagram, follows, likes, all these things are really appreciated. And thank you so much for your time.